So I'll call to order the Board of Commissioners meeting from March 10th. And we are going to start with introductions. I'm Laura Hill Eubanks from Northfield, and I'm the chair of the Regional Planning Commission.
Bonnie Waninger, staff.
Bob Warnick, Berlin.
Jerry D'Amico, Roxburgh.
Michael Gray, Woodbury. Don LaHaye, Waitsfield.
Dara Torrey, Moortown.
Robin Junk, Marshfield. Amy Hornglass, Cabot.
George Klein, Barrytown.
Rich Turner, Williamstown.
Clare Rockstop.
Marcella Dent, Montpelier.
Lee Catania, Orange.
Joanna Stratney, Berry City.
Bill Aarons, Worcester.
Alan Quackenbush, Duxbury.
Julie Potter, East Montpelier.
Peter Carvey, Washington.
Nancy Chartrand, staff.
Steve Lotspeech, Waterbury.
Thank you all. Does anyone have any adjustments to the agenda before we get started? Hearing none, I'll move on to public comments. I don't believe we have any public here. So we are going to launch right into our regional planning exercise that Claire is going to lead for us. At page 2 of the packet, if you want to follow along, we're going to be hearing about the new regional plan needs to hear from the board members about issues and challenges and needs in your local communities, and we were hoping this would be a way to get started on the plan and come up with some ideas for services and regional needs that the RPC could work on and put into the plan. And first thing we're going to do is fill out these stickies. Claire's going to correct me if I get this wrong. Everyone got a packet of stickies, and if you could, write 5 to 7 local issues or challenges or even things that worked out well for you, and put one on each sticky, and then Claire is going to collect them later on. After you fill those out, we're going to give 3 minutes to each commissioner. We'll go around the room, and you can share with us the 5, up to 3 issues if you could. If you want to just focus on one that you think is really important, that's fine too. And if you're not ready to share with us, we can come back to you at the end of the meeting, or you can email it in to us, and so we'll have the information anyway. So, were you going to do an introduction, or was that?
I think Laura has summarized it well for us. You have these stickies, and so the intent is that while we have fairly limited time to kind of get into kind of all the items that you may be wanting to discuss, we want to give you the opportunity to write them down so we can capture them. And I guess we just wanted to reiterate that this is more of a brainstorming session. We want to kind of get all the items on the table, so to speak, in this first round of where we are, and that we want to kind of hold off on kind of discussing kind of the merit of a certain issue, and we don't really want to get into discussing what possible solutions are right now. This is an opportunity first for you to kind of download onto your sticky notes, and we would like to be collecting them kind of once you've said it. Would like to be collecting them from you and putting them up so you can kind of see what some of them are, and it's also a way for us to kind of document that, and to the degree possible, Bonnie and I may be doing some level of organization as you're talking to see where there may be similarities. It may well be that many of your municipalities have similar challenges or issues, and that can highlight, kind of some of the work that still needs to be done in the region, and that would be kind of integrated into both, your future board meetings and into our regional plan as we're starting that process. So that's kind of just to add on to what Laura had mentioned. So yes, you have these sticky notes. We ask you to write those down, and if you have written them down, you can just let us know, and we may kind of circulate around the periphery while you are sharing. And then the other sticky dot notes, the dots, we'll talk a little bit more about what those will be used for kind of in the next agenda item.
So if you want to take a few minutes to write down your issues, then we can start.
And does anyone need extra pens, pencils?
Just using the headings that are,
So kind of ignore the statements that are on the walls for this portion of the agenda. This is primarily kind of what you experience and what conversations are in your municipality about what's going on. And then we'll talk about these forward-thinking statements later on in the meeting. I had received a couple comments ahead of time from Callis, so I wrote those down and I put them up here to give you an idea of, something that I just heard today.
So I think what I'll do is I'll look around to see who looks like they're ready to go, and then we'll just go this way. I think I'm going to start with Alan
Can we
because
wait
you look
a few
like you're
minutes
ready.
here and-
You want to wait?
I'd rather wait. I think it's going to be distracting if people are
Okay.
talking and we're trying to,
Okay.
like, can we just have 5 minutes to
Yep.
get stuff written down?
You're supposed to lose at home.
I know, but
You were
we got stickies, we're supposed
He
to write
did
it
it up
down.
here at home.
I've got the ideas, I need to write.
Bob had a head start.
Okay, it does feel a
Okay.
little bit like elementary school in here right now, but I think we'll be okay. Let's see.
Did you want us to mention our town's name on the sticky, or is being anonymous fine?
It's up to you. If you feel like this is particularly unique, or do you want to make sure that this is heard from your specific town?
Everybody okay? So I'm going to go back to Alan and let you go first.
thank you. I'll start with a success. And this is, our town was one of 5 towns in the Mad River Valley to get a grant to have an engineering firm look at erosion problems throughout the towns. And identified 50 projects, and then whittled it down to 20, and then whittled it down to 5 priority items. So I think it was amazing work that the engineering firm did that our town wouldn't have done without them. So I think that was a good success story. And the big challenges that go along with our success is storm events. Storm events in Duxbury are just continuing on and on. Every rainstorm, every rain event, we get major rainfalls in a short period of time, and it just washes out roads and culverts, and even the ones that have been done according to the new state standards have been washed out. So that's a real challenge, is how we're going to deal with that. Maybe we should just close the town and move everyone down to Route 100. And that would be good. Another challenge is getting volunteers to serve in town and having leadership, people stepping up for leadership that are capable of that. A lot of times people hate to say this, but they're really not capable, and they take our town backwards for years. And it's just not a pleasant thing to see. And just filling out the volunteers for the different committees and towns has been hard. And I'm lucky because after town meeting, I had a couple people come up, so I think I'm going to have a full planning commission for the first time in 6 years.
Yep.
So that's nice.
Thank you. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
And then also, I think the town's going to have to look at, contracting with professional services, especially like a bookkeeper, payroll. We're lucky that we had an incompetent treasurer who admitted that he was incompetent and stepped down, and it's been replaced with a competent woman who's also our town clerk. So that's going to be good, but what happens the next time when she's ready to retire? I don't see anyone out there, so we may need to look at professional services for that kind of thing, and also for engineering services. And lastly, needs, big needs for infrastructure, community wastewater, broadband, cell phone service, and three-phase power, all preventing people from having businesses in town. In Duxbury, we're so limited, people have to open an office in Waterbury instead of working from their home. So that's it.
Thank you very much. You only need to give us 3, but that
We will take all of those.
we will take all of them. Go ahead, Julie.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll follow Alan's example and start off with a success. And that is East Montpelier's capital plan and budget process. Several years ago, after we had a surprise, we need a new firehouse, and surprise, we need a new elementary school, people reasonably said, don't we plan for these things? And so we got a committee together to try and figure out how to do capital planning and budgeting in our town. And we looked at the VLCT model, which was way too complicated for us. But we ultimately figured out what it was we had, what its condition was, what the lifespans were expected to be, and put a capital plan and budget process in place. It's been in place for 5 years. This year, we bought a new grader. It was planned, and we paid cash for it, which we're real thrilled with. So that's a success. We've got challenges and needs, though. What the need is, we do have a need for more housing in town, and especially more, what I'll refer to as more affordable, not affordable in the formal definition, but more affordable for more people housing, and also senior housing. The challenges that go along with that is that we don't have an adequate village water supply. It's a private water system. There's no new investments being put into it, and there's a moratorium on new hookups, which means we can't grow in the village. And we don't have a village wastewater system. And between the two of them, it's very hard to get anybody interested in doing some development in the village. One of the challenges we have that may not be related too much to planning per se, but it's a challenge for the town, is just the rapidly increasing costs of employee health insurance, and that's a challenge. And the new one that had not been on my radar, but it came up in town meeting this year, is the financial impacts and for maintaining the ambulance service in town. Like a lot of ambulance services, you need people who are highly trained, have a lot of time. We can't do it on volunteers anymore. And so the fire department's asking to gradually ramp up to the point where we've got full-time, round-the-clock employees. But the costs for doing that are going to escalate rapidly over the years, and the select board's asking whether or not we might be better, perhaps, looking at some different way of providing ambulance services in town. My guess is that if that's happening with us, it's probably happening elsewhere in the region, and it's a relevant issue, I think, for us to raise. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Very good. Peter.
Yes, in Washington, we have a couple of challenges. One, as Julie was saying, is affordable housing, but actually just more housing. Our downtown area is very small, and that's where the water system is. And with no sewage system at all in the town, it's going to be a real challenge to get some more housing. And the second problem with it we particularly have is we have an old dam that's going to be removed. And some of the estimates that have been tossed around are just, out of our town's purview at all, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars because of all the mud that's backed up behind this thing. That would be the second one. And the third one, even though it sounds almost contradictory, we need more housing, but we need to maintain the rural characteristics of our little town. That was made very clear in meetings we've had from the public with the Planning Commission, as well as at town meeting. And no one wants our little town to change as far as its rural character is concerned, and that will become a challenge with the economy the way it is. The taxes will continue to go up and whatever. So those are basically the real three challenges that we have in town.
Thank you. Byron?
Byron Atwood, Berrytown. I'm going to talk about our goals, because after all, our goals are based on our challenges, which are based upon our needs, and which will lead to our successes. So basically for Berrytown, this is right out of our town plan rather than off the top of my head. Growth is likely and desirable, should be managed in such a way as not to burden the capacity of public utilities, facilities, services, and infrastructure. 2, the town should encourage economic development in a manner which keeps pace with the employment needs of town residents in the central Vermont labor market, in order to reduce the town's reliance on its residential tax base and strengthen and diversify the local economy. 3, growth and development should be balanced among residential, industrial, and commercial uses. Growth and development of industry and of housing for low, moderate income residents is encouraged. Growth and development should include rehabilitation and continued use of existing structures where considered feasible. 4, growth and development should be planned and managed so as to respect, enhance, and minimize adverse effect on visual beauty and natural areas, including land-based recreation and forest integrity. The town wishes to ensure that all development include the provision of appropriate landscape plans to screen and enhance the aesthetics of residential and commercial areas. 5, ground and surface waters for drinking and recreation, open lands, forests, farms, natural recreational areas, architecturally sensitive areas, and wildlife habitat should be recognized as valued resources, and the preservation should be balanced with other considerations in making planning decisions. Last but not least, 6, because of Berrytown's hills and valleys that collect water at higher elevations, flash flooding is a primary concern with regard to flooding. Working towards becoming more flood resilient, as well as monitoring and mitigating alluvial erosion where possible, is important. Thank you.
Thanks, Byron. Steve, I think you're next.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll go through some challenges and successes. I'll start with one where there's a need. Affordable housing has been mentioned, and this is a big challenge in Waterbury, where we're an employment center trying to find housing for those who work in Waterbury, especially at more moderate and low income. And we've had some successes. We have 3 affordable housing projects, and then some other Section 8 housing and so on. So we've been attempting to meet the need, but there's still a need. Then energy conservation and seeking more reliability on renewable energy is a huge challenge for all of our communities. I think the municipality has done a good job taking the lead in developing solar generation especially, and we continue to do that, looking at our buildings, but I think that's an ongoing challenge, especially for transportation and how to be effective in moving towards renewables. Talk a little bit about natural resources. We have a very important wildlife corridor in Waterbury on the border with Stowe, and I think we've had some good success in conserving that wildlife corridor and building awareness around that. So I would say that's both a challenge and a success. And I'll just mention a couple other things briefly. One is traffic. Our exit 10 area is like a big funnel, funneling traffic, especially from the north, because Lamoille County is thriving, quite honestly, and our community is thriving in many ways. So this results in traffic issues and congestion around exit 10. That's an ongoing challenge that we're continuing to tried to meet. And then the last challenge that I'd like to mention is how to effectively address drug and alcohol use and addiction in our community. I think that's is a broader planning issue that affects our community in some serious ways that we need to continue to try to find ways to deal with that effectively.
Thank you. So I'll go next. I asked our town manager what the issues he thought Northfield faced that were the most challenging, and he came up with the cost of roads and bridges by far. Northfield really struggles with coming up with the money to take care of all the dirt roads and the bridges in Northfield. I think we have over 50 miles of dirt road and never have enough money to take care of all of it. The second one was the cost of our police services. We actually do have a force, I think, of 6 now, and it's very expensive, and it's getting much more expensive. And I guess I was thinking that that might be something that could be more of a regionally thought of service at some point. And last is money, which kind of overlaps everything in Northfield. One of the problems we have is we have a lot of nonprofits and a very big university that owns probably half of the taxable property in town. So we are always short of revenue for infrastructure and services. So those are our biggest challenges. Bob?
I'm hearing a lot of similarities. I had on my list housing. I've been told by the hospital that we can't get nurses and hospital personnel partially because of the housing lack in Central Vermont. I heard getting volunteers. I think that's a real big problem, to serve on town committees, serve on fire departments. So it's and EMTs. I had down this is unique to Berlin, town center designation. We were fortunate to get a grant this year to plan for that and work on the master plan. So it's accomplishment and a need type thing. Water improvements and sewer improvements. We passed 2 bonds in the last year, and so we will get a new well, and so that's among the accomplishments. I'll stop there.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't done 5 or 6.
Okay, thanks. You can give them to the guys.
I saw that you wore out a pencil in the way.
All right, Jerry.
Yeah, I want to start with the success as a follow-up on Alan's comment. School merger. Roxbury actually, people I have talked to think the school merger was a great idea. It's worked well for us. We had school choice before the school merger was forced on us by the state. So we've merged with the city of Montpelier, and from everybody I've heard, it's been great. We've got young families moving to town. Some of it is because of this. They now have a viable school to go. To echo several others, volunteers.
Yeah.
This is a real challenge, getting more and capable people to serve, and not only fire department, but all the different municipal boards. We don't have an EMT in Roxbury. Keeping up with state mandates. You know, I'm gonna pick on the stormwater requirements from the state, but there's so many of them, and they keep coming up, and it's a real challenge for the select board. Not only to think about them and act on them, but also, you know, the money that's required or the long-term planning that comes along with it. If we don't get enough support from the state to do that. The third challenge would be municipal roads. State funding hasn't changed in decades, the state funding formula. It would work much better for many of the small towns if we had block grants, because then we could have a better chance for long-term budgeting and thinking out our capital needs for major maintenance projects.
All right. Thank you. Michael?
So just hearing what everybody's saying, I'm realizing that, and I kind of came at this in a fairly pessimistic mood. Sorry, and I'll still share some of that. But I just hear a lot of similar problems. It doesn't seem to matter whether you're a little rinky-dink town on the edge of the region or a larger city or town. But so I would like to start with a few successes, which I hadn't even thought of until I started hearing others. But Woodbury, we became pretty proactive with municipal roads, general permit, and road work before it really became established, as it was beginning to be talked about a number of years ago, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And I think, with the help of the Regional Planning Commission and some of the state agencies, there's still a lot for us to do, but I think we're in pretty good shape with our roads, at least. So that could be a minor success. We have real challenges, and other people have mentioned this, with any kind of service that helps people be connected to our modern digital world. We have very poor cell phone coverage. We have basically just good internet service along the Route 14 corridor, and if you're anywhere away from that, you have very poor service. And we do have a lot of young people moving into town, mostly kids that grew up in Woodbury and then moved away and now have come back, but they do have a certain need for that, mostly for the businesses that they're trying to live in Woodbury with, and there isn't much. We have joined the Central Vermont Fiber Municipality, but that's a number of years out, I think, before there's much benefit. One of the problems that we have in town is that we have a lot of substandard housing, basically old funky hunting camps that people now live in year-round. I know just by looking at them that they're probably very energy efficient, and it doesn't seem to be much change in that. We have real any kind of policing issues, and of course, again, being pretty much out on the periphery of this region, we do have now a small attempt at public transportation in town. Some people are taking advantage of it, but just see a lot of people. We're really a bedroom community, people going to Montpelier, Waterbury, Barry, or going north to St. Jay or Morrisville, and everybody's kind of going in their own car, and there really isn't much opportunity to try to change that. And then just one other, our main village, really shouldn't even be there, I think. It's at the bottom of a couple of hills and ravines. It's a flooding issue. We have had some successes in dealing with some of that, and there are a lot of projects that we have going to try to alleviate that, but there really isn't much room for any kind of development in that area, and that seems to be our main center. Woodbury doesn't have much of a centralized housing area. With the wetlands and brooks and flooding in the village, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to try to pursue that there. So that's another challenge to figure out how to deal with that. So as you can see, it was pretty pessimistic, but that's all. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael. Don?
Mad River Valley is pretty fortunate to have, pretty well organized with the towns having Mad River Planning District. And yet we still have all the same issues that everybody else has. But I have only heard a few folks interspersed here talk about health and safety. It's a big issue now, and companies, not even real large companies, the larger companies are required to have a health and safety officer. So I don't see why each town couldn't have someone designated to cover those issues. Now, the cities probably already have them. I don't know, does anybody know if any of the cities have an appointed health and safety officer? But I've never heard any.
We have a health officer.
Towns have that too.
They do have them?
I mean, not,
Volunteer.
the effectiveness is another situation, but yes, we do have a health officer even in Washington.
Yeah, well, again, now seems to be a time when, I mean, not that you can expect somebody in Waitsfield to step up and straighten this worldwide health issue, but for our own towns, I wouldn't know where to go, if I, came down with that. So, I think it would be helpful if there was someone designated to at least say, well, the state's directing us to do this or that, or, at least have someone in there to be able to say what's what. But beyond that, and in fact, Bob mentioned about getting nurses. Yeah, they have trouble getting nurses and whatnot because of the housing. But that's the same in every one of our towns and the cities.
Right.
So, other than repeating what everyone else says here, the health issue came to mind to me to be something that may need to take a closer look at.
Thank you, Dawn. Tara?
Hello. A lot of similar sounding issues around the table tonight. I'll start with a success. We, in the town of Moortown, in our village center, will have sidewalks for the first time being installed this summer. It was 9 years in the making. I helped get the grant when my son was an elementary school student, and now he's about to graduate. And I had no idea how long the process was going to take. But it did involve having some catch basins and some infrastructure under the sidewalks that needed to be addressed. And we were able to use the same pot of funding that Alan mentioned with the 5 towns working together on stormwater. So we got help from the CVRPC and others, Friends of Mad River, in getting some work done that we were able to fund that infrastructure that needed to be addressed before we did the sidewalks. So the challenge that is going to be happening in Moortown this summer is going to be the sidewalk project. We're getting repaved in our village, and the bridge that went out during Irene and has been a one-way with a stoplight. That's being replaced. So that's all happening this summer. So we'll be sending people over into Waitsfield on Pony Farm Road. So while we have all this success and vitality in the village, we've had a big black cloud looming as our region, the Mad River Valley schools and towns, under a unified board, are looking at how to use and optimize our school buildings for the expected number of students. And it's been a really difficult process, and it's been a challenge in Moortown because we are seeing a lot of young families moving in and a lot of houses being built. In the last 4 years, we've had 50 houses built. So it's like this disconnect between what we're seeing and hearing and what now we're in this group picture. So it's been a trying year, but we're working on that, and we've also had a lot of opportunity with large tracts of forested land in the mountainous part of town, all going on the market at the same time, like over 1,000 acres, and contiguous properties. So it's been a really good opportunity for people in town to get together and talk about like what could we potentially do in terms of conservation. So there was a lot of on-the-ground meetings over the last year with help from, Vermont Land Trust and others, but we ended up getting a actual land donation made to the town. So that's exciting. And we have a lot of these young families that have moved in are big recreation folks. So we're seeing some vitality in our recreation committees, and in our trail planning, as well as the Mad River Valley having a lot going on with trails that includes us. And so, yeah, I mean, emergency services, that came up at town meeting. We pay to 4 different emergency service providers because of where people live in Moortown, where it can, some people live near Montpelier, some people are by Waterbury. So, and our local, in the Mad River Valley Volunteer Group, actually had a big budget shortfall and had to ask all the towns to pay quite a bit more than they're accustomed to paying. And then, the big challenge for Moortown is economic development. We don't have much of a business base at all. So, our quality of life and our access to other areas like Montpelier, Waterbury, Waitsfield, and our good schools are the big draw for people to live in our town. So, it was good to hear about the capital planning process in East Montpelier because we're starting one as well. So I will share you as a resource.
Thank you. Robin?
Almost everything I wrote down, I've already heard. The affordable housing, lack of volunteers is really bad in our town. Nobody wants to volunteer. They all want something done, but nobody wants to step up and help. And actually, after this month, I'm the only planning commission member left.
Such power.
Meeting because we won't have a quorum. So we're getting desperate for volunteers. That's a really, really difficult. That and the town's having trouble balancing business, and we have more conserved land in Marshfield than a lot of towns. We're large, which hurts us economically because our tax base is not very big. So everybody's taxes keep going up. And people come in and they want to do an agriculture business, and it's very large and it takes a lot of town services, but because it's considered agricultural by the state, it ties your hands as to what you can do or regulate with these businesses, even though they're taking a lot of resources from the town, which hurts everybody else living there. That's probably one of our biggest challenges. We're redoing our zoning right now, trying to before everybody leaves. And it's definitely challenging because we do lack affordable housing, and because we have so much land conserved, it limits, we probably had 3 homes built last year. So our tax base is stagnant, and that's not a good thing. So that's one of our big things, is trying to figure out how to address it.
Yes. Great. Thank you. Amy?
From Cabot, and I wrote down age in place and keep youth here. I suppose 2 into like one sticky, if that's okay. But they kind of go together, we need both. Stop squeezing out small farms and homesteads. I know that's a big concern, came up at town meeting again, always comes up at town meeting. And affordability, which is not a surprise. And I tried to bring up affordability the last time our town did our town plan, and for some reason our regional planning commission helper at the meeting said we couldn't, that there was no place in the plan. The only place it existed was under housing, that the idea of affordability in general can be included, but that there was a bit about housing. And so I looked around the room when you've had these up, and I see there is one, and I don't know how long we've had a regional plan in this area, but we're not fixing that one. I mean, I think we need to, my suggestion and my hope is that as we go through this process this time, that we'll fix whatever's holding us back from that, because something is really, that one's not made any progress, if anything, the opposite. So we probably need to put on our thinking caps and see how we can change that and share this beautiful place with more people, which is what a lot of people want to do, but keep the rural character. Which you can do.
Good trick.
George?
Well, thank you. First off, I'd like to thank Byron for sharing our goals. We put a lot of work into that, and they mean a lot. But what I'd like really to address is opening up another chapter in that area, and it's something that Steve has really already mentioned. But I'm going to use a broader brush than what Steve did, and talk about substance abuse and prevention. I've looked up a couple reports on that, and one of the reports I found was dollars and cents on substance abuse. It's a little dated, but it says it costs nationally $510 billion. And I'll break it down a little bit for you. Specialized treatment and prevention, $15.4 billion. Treatment of medical consequences, $101 billion. Goods and services related to crashes, fires, crimes, and criminal justice, $59 billion. That resource cost is $172 billion of the $510 billion. For productivity costs, it's work loss due to premature deaths, $140 billion. Work loss due to illness, $127 billion. Work loss by crime victims, $3 billion. And work due to incarceration, $67.6 billion. That total is $338 billion, totaling $510 billion. Coming to a more later report that was put out by Governor Scott, it is saying between 2010 2016, drug increased by 159%. I don't know if you read an article just, I believe it was maybe last week, referring to Brattleboro. In the first months of this year, the break-in, 407% increase already in Brattleboro. According to the Governor Scott's report, fentanyl deaths, they increased 920%. Also, the cost of, this is a quote, the cost of the state in terms of lost productivity and increases to social services, treatment, and law enforcement are insurmountable. This is a quote from them. So I'm looking at not only Berry Town addressing this issue, but I'd like to actually see the regional commission start addressing this issue. In Berry Town, we contract services of our EMS to many of you folks here. That rising cost puts a strain on our workforce, and it costs all of you additional dollars as well. I would even really go so far, now that we're going to be looking at retailing marijuana, and a tax associated with that, the last I've heard was 14%, and that is supposed to go to education. I would really ask the commission to really direct the executive director to get a seat at the table to get some of this allocated funds of what's going to be this taxed on, that we receive that and be distributed amongst the regional commissions, rather than maybe it being to one particular area, whether it be Brattleboro or Chittenden County. I would have said Chittenden County first, but I don't want to pick on Chittenden County all the time. Well, Brattleboro does have a huge problem. And this is nothing, this is something that we're not immune to either. It's affecting all of us, and I wish we could all get on board on that. Now, I'll put that one to rest and let you think about that, and thank you, Steve, for initially bringing it up. The second thing that we struggle with in our town plan is decommissioning. I've always thought that solar panels, for instance, should have a serial number with the manufacturer, and they should be followed cradle to grave. I don't think that they should be for sale on Craigslist, come off your roof and then go to sale on Craigslist, and we not find out where these things are going to be disposed of and who is going to be responsible for disposing them and picking up the cost of that disposal. I think it actually should go back to the manufacturer of the panels. So that's another issue, futuristic, that we haven't really been able to address, and I haven't seen the PUC address it either. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Paula?
Ow. That's a hard act to follow. And I'm the alternate, and so I am not Bram. Just want to say that. Bram would have no to say. We know this. So, I'm just going to name a few. I've made a big list, and there are actually quite a few successes in it. But I'm hearing about housing, and in Plainfield, we're trying to think about. You know, we have the same thing with really old housing stock, and we have a village. Village is, everything in it is 150, 200 years old. There's probably not a single building in the village that has level floors. That would be a marvel. Anyway, but and all the newer housing, as with everywhere, it gets built out, right? And our plan is trying to concentrate growth in the village, but getting from the idea to the reality is it's just, I don't see a way. It's a long road, and the intention has to be really clear. But for now, every new building just goes out on 5 acres or 10 acres along a road, and just more cars. So that's one thing. I would say a major challenge for us is the volume and impact of vehicular traffic on Route 2. It's damaging. It's hard for the people who live along Route 2, and there's not much we can do about it, but we've been in a discussion about repairing that intersection into the village, and we've begun to look at, like, hey, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we had another entrance into the village that would also be an exit, and it's another road, but it's an opportunity to create a park, and all kinds of really cool things so that's it's something I think we're gonna move toward, maybe, and I don't know if you call it a need. Successes, we have one particular dedicated grant writer who has gotten us sidewalks and really beautiful lighting and a kiosk, and we've got a really great, I wouldn't say 100% volunteer thing, but we have people who show up and build things in the rec field, and we have an all-volunteer fire department and fast squad. Unfortunately, they're getting kind of burnt out. Someone on the fast squad was saying they've already gone to over 100 calls this year, and they're volunteers. Wow.
and it's like what you're talking about. They're going into some bad situations. So I guess, I mean, I think those are the biggies. Let me check this need right here. Yeah, I think that I'll stop there.
Thank you. Rich?
All right, Rich from Williamstown. I'll hit a couple of challenges that we have. Some is downtown business development, economic development down there, a little bit limited. Well, one thing that came up in this past year, had some heated debate, was increasing ATV traffic and ATV. I know some of the towns have dealt with it before. Using town roads to connect ATV trails, and the thought was also trying to bring in some business to some of the local businesses there. But I'll tell you that some of those select board meetings had more people present than town meeting, because it sort of brings out the best and the worst of things. So it's been, there was an ordinance crafted with that, and then I think it's going through the either appeal process or get on board. So we'll see what happens down the road, but we definitely want to try to address downtown, and kind of tying into that, we don't have any zoning in Williamstown. And if you say zoning, they'll try to run you out of town. So, but we are addressing the planning commission, some downtown development standards, try to clean up some places. We're tying together some ordinances like, you know, car removal and junk and noise and pet and that sort of thing to make it a little more pedestrian friendly, family friendly, business friendly, and those sorts of things. So we're kind of tiptoeing through it, but we're making some progress on that. We're almost wrapping that process up. So we're actually making some headway in that, even though that we don't have particular zoning. Some other challenges, infrastructure, especially the way Williamstown is located on the Williamstown Gulf and right between two very steep land masses. We get a lot of stormwater runoff. So, and the maintenance itself, we have increased the budget that did go through this year, so we're trying to do a lot more maintenance on the roads themselves, trying to keep them up to grade. And we are in line, have been working on trying to get a stormwater master plan grant too. So hopefully by spring, summer, we'll be looking at that and trying to move things forward to help out, water quality and some of the issues that we have, ground, surface waters, and the storm waters. A couple people have mentioned, from volunteer efforts, and also youth. We've been trying to get more youth engaged and involved, but I tell you, at town meeting, pretty much, majority of the crowd was retirement age. A few folks here and there. We did just talk about having town meeting even though the voting has to happen at that certain time, but looking at an evening meeting or a weekend or something like that. And I heard, I don't know about other towns, but I heard sometimes you get a different crowd, but the numbers don't change that much. So I don't really know, but we're kind of looking at that because there were a number of people that stood up this year and just trying to get other folks engaged. So we really want to start targeting a lot of the youth in town, and some of the up and coming leadership and some of those issues. A few successes. We've been pretty successful with renewable energy and solar farms that we've had. Next one is going in now on some town land that we have. So that's been pretty steady, and we've had some good returns on that. Thanks to the help of the region with our local hazard mitigation plan, just kind of tying up the last issues on that, and that was a really good process to go through, and also raised other questions in the town while we were going through it for emergency services, and what are asked even at town meeting last year, what some of the concerns were, other than flooding, ice storms, high wind, end up being big ones, but also invasive plants and bugs, emerald ash borer, and things like that. So we were able to tie that into our emergency management plan. And speaking of emerald ash borer, we did get a grant that's forthcoming from Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District. I guess it's going to be tied with a couple other towns. We're just sort of starting the process, doing the ash tree inventory and then an EAB management plan to hopefully get in line for some funds for executing. And the town did put some money into that, and then we have a lot of in-kind resources to go forward with that too. So that's a pretty good success for us. And once we got the Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District, they said, "Hey, Rich, would you like to join our board?" So I guess I'm on that board. I'm their newest member there too. Doing a lot of work with that. Those have been, I guess, some of our issues, and we don't have, transit's always an issue, so we're looking at putting in high-speed rail to Montpelier instead. We'll start on that right now.
That's about some of the highlights, and I don't want to repeat it. There are other similar issues that other towns have as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcella?
We just talked about light rail out of Montpelier last night, so perhaps that's coming. I still consider myself fairly new to the Planning Commission in Montpelier, so I don't have a good grasp on what all of the challenges in Montpelier are, but what we've been focusing on recently has been housing, so this isn't new to the conversation, but housing, both stock, like quantity, and affordability. And I think that that has caused some challenges with economic development in terms of we don't have enough housing stock to house the number of people that work in Montpelier. So that puts a little bit of a challenge to a bigger company coming in with a lot of jobs, sort of like a big influx of jobs all at once, because we don't have the space for those potential workers. But on the other side, we have had some good successes recently in sort of the downtown development zone in Montpelier. So some new downtown, like work that Montpelier Alive has been doing, our downtown partnership organization, and there was the new Caledonia Spirits building is not quite downtown, but it was sort of a lot of moving pieces to make that business come in, and has been pointed to several times over the last 6 months that I've been with Montpelier as a success for both kind of creatively making it so that the city could invest in infrastructure upgrades for the building that would then get repaid with taxes, like mini tip work, and also some environmental stuff, because I think it was like a brownfield or something like that. So anyways, some good successes there, but the challenges that we've been most focused on recently have been around housing stock and affordability.
Thank you. Lee?
What I've heard, I'll say ditto to that, because, it's a small, we're probably the smallest or next to smallest municipality. And by people, but we have a large area that is, a lot of the land in there is conserved land. We don't have a large tax base, and that really hurts. But I'll do with a semi-success, and we worked with Plainfield to get Brook Road and Reservoir Road reclassified to be a connector road between 302 and Route 2. There's a lot of traffic that isn't local traffic on that road that they use, and if we can, if it has to be approved by the federal government. If they do, then that will help us out in the future to have that road reclassified. Because it is a problem in both municipalities, the maintenance and upkeep on the bridges and the road itself. Volunteers is just about non-existent in our town. We've done everything we possibly could think of to encourage to get volunteers to work on the rec committee and the other committees that we should have in town, and we have absolutely no volunteers. Nobody wants to do any volunteer work at all. They complain a lot, but they don't want to do the volunteer work. And the cell and internet service, I've heard the same issue there. But one of the issues that I think we're going to have in the future in the town is these the tactical basin plans, the implementation of those, just the administration part of it, where they want us to ensure that some of the headwaters are protected, and it is going to be it's a challenge for a town of our size. For Oranges, we have headwaters in both basins, in Connecticut and Winooski. And we want to protect the headwaters, but you have to have mechanisms and everything in there to do that. And I think what would be more equitable to a lot of these, the smaller municipalities, when you have a tactical basin plan, it should be the implementation of that. Maybe you need a regional basin commission or something to do that. Other states have done that. Instead of putting it on the town, they can spread it out, because the benefits of improving the water in the basin is for everybody, not just one place. So I'll leave that there, but that would really help.
Thank you. Janet?
Yep, ditto. Berry City has lots of successes. I think that we do pretty good with the bare bones staff that we have in City Hall. People work really hard, but some of the things that I wrote down, I wrote budget and finances. One of our successes is our budget passed. Yay, $13 million. But if you look at the budget, police and fire make up 42% of that budget. So that's really tough from a staff standpoint. And people complain about aging infrastructure and why are we spending money on this when money is being spent elsewhere. So a common theme that I hear a lot. Transportation opportunities. Route 302 goes right down through North Main Street. It is North Main Street, right down through the city. I was speaking with our Efficiency Vermont representative today, and he said people just drive right down through and they don't look on either side. And we're looking to continue our revitalization efforts in the downtown. And how do you get people to start looking around and park your car and get out and walk around like they used to? Continues to be a challenge. Obviously, affordable housing. Berry City's renting to single-family home ownership is 60-40. So we have lots of housing stock. It's not always the greatest quality. My daughter's in the market to buy a house, and we haven't found anything in Berry City that I think I should let her move into. So that will always be a challenge, I think, given that we have the courthouse in the downtown. We have a lot of homelessness. We have a lot of poverty-stricken folks. I think homelessness is a huge issue for us right now. Every morning walking into City Hall, there's probably at least 10 people gathering in our vestibule and using it as a warming shelter. And it's frustrating because it's almost like they think they're entitled to be there. So how do we deal with folks of a mindset and try to get them to better themselves at the same time? Flood resiliency will always be an issue for Berry City. And any municipality built on a river, it seems to be the norm in the country. It's epicenters, it was great for trade. But with rules and regulations, it makes it difficult now for people to even fix up their buildings. One of the things that was voted for in a positive, I felt was a negative. I really struggle as being in charge of the Housing Board of Review, those folks that are rental folks. The voters voted to eliminate in our charter language for the Housing Board of Review. So any renter who has a security deposit issue can only go to small claims court now. So they've proposed to remove the ability to have that dealt with at the local level. And I think that's really going to hurt us if the legislature approves our charter change. The other thing that they voted in the positive was to eliminate our security deposit rule. In Berry City, you're allowed a security deposit in either 1 month's rent, either on the front or on the end. And for most of you who have renters, they can ask for all three, first, last, security, pet, you name it. And the voters voted to eliminate that as well. And I really believe that that's going to hurt this population that we have in the city. And potentially lean us more towards worse opioid crises, things like that. So, and some of the other notes that I wrote down are we're forever struggling with trying to get a grocery store back in the city. So that goes to, a myriad of different things: budget and financing, housing, homelessness, flood resiliency. And the last thing I wrote down was climate change and our dependency on fossil fuels. We have a lot of vehicles. We fill up at the gas pumps. given that we have this energy number we have to hit by 2050, I think all of us are gonna be struggling to make this goal. I don't think we've even started to chip away at the iceberg, and it's 2020 already, so. That's my positive aspect.
Thank you, Janet.
Yay, team.
And Bill.
Well, I had climate change issues down, but nothing specific. It's just that that's something we're considering working with. We had great reluctance to consider zoning, so same as Orange, I guess, right? Williamstown. Yeah, I mean, can't do it. So we try to rely on our regulations and that kind of thing. It's important to prevent to protect unfragmented forest blocks. That's something that has been on our radar. And also preserving agricultural land for agriculture, which is, that's important there. I don't know if we're smaller than you or not, but there's no, it's pretty small. The success is that we just did a survey which pretty much looked like the survey that we did 10 or 11 years ago. And we're pretty much right on target, which is that people basically want to preserve the town and the natural aspects of it. And I don't think we've added a lot of housing. We've added very few jobs. So people, I think maybe it's because it's mostly a bedroom community, perhaps, but people are more concerned with keeping it the way it is than bringing in development or trying to lower the tax base or anything like that, or raise it. And of course we have to produce an alternative energy plan, as so many people do, so that's, and we're still trying to get our town plan worked on. We've got some challenges and some successes.
Thank you. That was amazingly informative, and we have a lot of work to do in the region. That will help with coming up with issues to think about in the regional plan, and hopefully some strategies to address them. And I think, Claire, you were going to maybe tell us about common themes, or?
Well, Bonnie was one of the big helpers here, so I want to give her an opportunity to see kind of, if there was anything that kind of struck you as you were going through it. But something that struck me going through it was there are many similarities between the different towns, but also the diversity of our region. When you're looking at, not all small rural communities are the same, and that struck me with the comment of the number of houses built in Moortown compared with Marshfield. That difference, 50 and 3. Right. And so even though they may have very similar kind of rural general profiles, there are very different aspects happening, and also the school merger. The other side of the story was very interesting. That was raised, and so these are all, I think, really interesting components that just help kind of shape out what are the situations that are happening in the region, and that we are blessed with the challenge to kind of try to identify common strategies. If there's anything that you saw through that.
The number of you who talked about what I'll characterize as municipal finance issues. If you think about even 10 years ago at a regional planning commission, some of the issues you've talked about as emergent, I don't know if they're emerging, but I think one of the few times here would be municipal finance struggles with emergency services, and thinking about how you're going to accommodate those into the future. And there was a third, the substance use, I think, is a third issue that 10 years ago I don't think was on the table for the regional plan. So thinking about housing we've been talking about for 50 years or more, I think it's a perpetual issue. Try and address who needs to be housed and where might change from decade to decade, but that the emerging issues for the regional plan to address, there were 3 new ones I heard this time.
Another, I didn't comment on this, but another thing with municipal finance is, I think that is still a burden, and I know it's been talked about for a long time. In Woodbury, 3/4 of the taxes that we raise and pay go to the schools, and I have no objection to that at all. We need to have good schools, but that really hammers our town. I mean, we have this little pot of money left over to try to keep our roads up and, keep the general government things going. And, people have been complaining about school taxes for years, and there've been, this whole merger thing is supposed to help solve it, but it hasn't really made any change at all. It just seems to, in some ways making things worse. And property taxes, people have complained about those for years, and, the legislature does this or that, and they don't really seem to address those concerns. They just try these different things that don't seem to make any difference at all. But, for Woodbury, a lot of people just kind of scratch their heads, trying to figure out what to do with the little bit of money that we have left over to buy a truck or whatever, and just kind of look at the schools. And so the schools become kind of a scapegoat in a way. We want to have good schools, but it's a big expense.
Absolutely. All right, thank you very much. We are moving on to the second part of this part of the agenda, and we're going to talk about the new regional plan development process and the draft vision. And Claire's going to walk us through.
So in your packet, there were a couple of documents for your review. And the one that I wanted to spend a couple minutes on was the one that's on page 5, which is titled the Plan Development and Planning Process Guide. And so this is a guide that has been put together working with the Regional Plan Committee to kind of outline kind of what this process is that we are starting upon. For those who have not been with the commission for long, the current regional plan that we have was kind of, I think, initially written back in 2003, and over the past the years it's been modified, updated, amended, readopted. Kind of these are all these terms that we use with this plan. And so the plan that we have in place right now is dated 2016. We did amend it in 2018, but our current plan will expire in 2024. And so we are looking to, in earnest, start that process of not just simply kind of updating sections of that existing plan, but looking to develop what we're calling a new plan for the region. A few years ago, I guess maybe, I'm going to get the date wrong if I try and nail down the specific date, but an initiative was started, and it was referred to as Plan Central Vermont. And during that process, many of you may have been involved in that process with previous staff members. There was a big initiative and a planning process that was initiated, and there was a lot of good work that was done under that process. That never quite made it over the finish line, but we will be using a lot of that information. It may not be repackaged in the same way, but want to let you know that that will be used in this development of a new plan. And so the idea, the guide for developing this new plan is what is in your packet. Wasn't going to go through it section by section, but if anybody had kind of a question or comment on it, I think we have a couple minutes if people had any comments that they wanted to make on that document.
On page 7, I think it is.
Of the packet.
Of the packet.
Yeah.
Of the packet. It lists out, where it says public participation, types of public participation. There's inform, consult, involve, collaborate. So those are all the tasks that different groups are going to take on.
Well, that's kind of the different, those are the different generalized levels of public participation. And so that first row is an explanation of kind of what those terms mean, and then on the subsequent page, we kind of identified kind of which different groups would be involved in different ways based on kind of those descriptions that are outlined in that table.
Yeah, so it looks like on the next page, page 8, the stakeholders at the bottom of the page, the CVRPC Board of Commissioners, we're on an involved status, I guess, which, if you flip to the previous page, it's not a decision-making status. So then I was trying to figure out, like, who's gonna decide, who's gonna vote on it, who's gonna, approve this plan, and it looks like it was the people on the committee. I'm trying to find where that was, who the,
Yes.
Oh, yes, the collaborate role, right, which is to, decision in making development of alternatives and the identification of the preferred, they're choosing the preferred solution. They're kind of guiding the process, so, so we won't be eventually, as this commission, voting on this grant.
Yes, to clarify, you as the board will be responsible for making the final decision, adopting the plan. Part of the kind of reasoning between kind of making the distinction between kind of the involving and the collaborate and the role of the committee and the role of the board was basically to say, and you committee members can speak up, that they're the ones that are tasked with doing like the kind of making kind of some of those preliminary final decisions on which to then bring the recommendation to you to make like the final decision.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't see what stuff. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Bob?
One thing I heard here tonight, and it isn't in here, and maybe it doesn't belong in here as an aspiration perhaps, is about workforce. And I see there's a common thread, but we need to do things as a region to encourage, attract, develop, retain workforce. It goes back to the problem I mentioned with the nurses.
Right.
It isn't housing strictly, it's a number of things. But we can't keep or get Vermonters, people to come to Vermont to work. Everybody wants to come here to not work, apparently.
Retired.
Name when they're retired.
Yeah, retired. Or, yeah.
Or other.
I hate those
or other
people.
reasons. Welfare system was very nice, thank you. So
Me, of course.
we talked about the volunteers, Can't even get the retired people to volunteer.
Those people are lucky to be able to retire.
Volunteers do get.
That's the only thing.
I would
Yeah,
make
you
an
can work as
aspiration.
hard as you want if you're not lucky.
We should
on time.
encourage, try,
Unfortunate.
retain
Yeah.
a good workforce.
Bob, there is an aspiration on page 10, number 2, about fostering a prosperous and equitable and adaptable economy that provides full employment in a broad range of occupations at a livable wage. Do you think we need to go beyond that?
Yeah, fostering, providing those opportunities are meaningless if you can't find anybody to fill them. And so what we're failing at, and I'm looking at and listening to the governor, we're failing at is retaining people. They grew up here in the first place, or attracting new people. We're just not doing a good job of it. We talked about it in Moortown. We talked about it in other towns. It's just, people can't fill jobs.
It's expensive to live in Vermont. I'm originally from New York, and a gallon of milk elsewhere is way less than $5. It's $5 here. It's crazy.
So,
Yeah, I'd say there has to be an economic platform. If there's no economic platform, people leave. There's no opportunities, there's no jobs. I've been saying it here for years. Our greatest export in the state is our young people. Why? Because we are extremely business unfriendly. I actually have been experiencing doing business in Vermont for 30 years. The
If I had known it would be like this, I would have gone into New Hampshire. All I had to do was move my plant about 30 miles east, and I've been in a state that was much more amenable. And I could give you example after example, but there are many of us here that have something to say. So I'll just give you one example. In Vermont, right now there's one insurance company that will insure DMS, machining and fabricating, for workers' compensation because it's really dangerous. In a society where very few people are makers. So, I've had experience here where I have hired someone who was older, pre-existing condition, and within 1 year, permanent disability on my company. Works for me for 1 year, we pay 100%. New Hampshire, they say, hey, you work for 30 years, DMS, you got one year of that. The cost on our business was in the tens of thousands of dollars while this went on. That's just one example. One other example is unemployment insurance. The state never said anything about it, but it used to be on the first $8,000 of earnings. Quietly, over the last 3 years, the state's increased that to the first 20,000 earnings. DMS basically pays almost $50,000 a year for unemployment insurance. We haven't laid anybody off in over a couple of years. And I basically have to have almost one person work just to pay that bill. And it never is talked about, I never hear it discussed. But every year, we get to pay out almost $50,000 a year. I could go on and on, I'll stop, but Bob, what I'm trying to say is that if this state wants to get serious about having people come here to actually work, I can take advantage of a generous welfare system, which is around $42,000 of benefits, if somebody just wants to play the game, or else retire. This state needs to get serious about really fostering a pro-business attitude, where there's opportunities for our young people to grow, develop, get meaningful jobs, and have an ability to contribute in our society. But there is no sign of that. And we actually live in a state that has elected a socialist as a senator. So that might suggest something in terms of who the voters in Vermont really are and what they really want. Socialism, it's never worked. 10 years ago, Venezuela, beautiful. Not so beautiful right now. Once again, socialism has failed. Until the state of Vermont and people in Vermont decide they really want to create economic opportunity and all the benefits that provides. Everybody had a common theme. With a good, real, healthy economy, a lot of these issues would not be being discussed today. And thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to say things that might be difficult.
Thank you, Byron. Paula?
I kind of just want to put a little dovetail on what Byron's saying and what's been said about that, because I've been working for 20 years in a public high school, and it occurred to me that it sort of accumulated in my head fairly over a period of time that, I mean, I think when we were all in high school, what do you want to do when you're in high school? You want to get out of there, right? You want to get out of there, and the furthest you can get out of your home state, the best, right? Because it's always going to be awesome in California or Colorado. Right now it's Colorado. You got to go to Colorado. So, but our schools, the culture of the school, at least the one I work in, is it communicates that in a sense to the kids. If you're going to be somebody, you're going to college out of Vermont, and you're going to live somewhere else and make a lot of money. We don't really message to the kids, here's what you can do here, and working is okay. Because it's all really about going to college. I hope, can you like delete this part from the video? But, you know, I'm overstating it for effect. You know that not everybody says that, but if I work with all kinds of kids, and specifically right now, I work with the kids who aren't doing so great in school. And they feel bad Because they're not going to college.
A lot of those kids, if they were put into a trades program, would do fabulous.
And
Hands-on learners
very-
are really not taking advantage of
And
like they
Berry
should be.
Tech, the CVCC program is small and it's competitive. They have a very, very restricted admissions at this point. So there's like this bottleneck, and I just want to say, I just want to say that that's the message the kids are getting. You're not going to college, you're a loser. You stay in Vermont, you're a loser.
Thank you. Dawn?
Every time I hear someone say anything about socialists and socialism, I think of the two major funding and well-being sources in this country. Can anybody name the two?
Medicare and Social Security.
You got it. Social Security, it's in the name. You know?
Thanks, Dawn.
So, there's that situation too that isn't being addressed, I think, too.
Well, that's what I was raising.
Referring to, okay.
That's an experience we have as well.
Okay.
We have open job openings that can't fill without taking some real chances.
Right. You shared one example of, yes.
I think Claire's going to help us with colored dots now. So we
Well, I was thinking the
lighten things up
segue
a
there
little.
was. Now we
look like
are
Wonder
turning to
Bread.
the future. And we're gonna think about what our future should be like now that we kind of get a sense of what current needs and challenges are, and looking to the future. And so gonna look to the draft vision statement that we have for your consideration for this new regional plan and the accompanying aspirations. This vision statement was not newly crafted by the Regional Plan Committee. We did look to the vision statement that had been put together under that Plan Central Vermont effort, and that was a broad effort where there was quite a bit of public participation there, and we looked at that existing statement that I believe had kind of come to you a few years ago, and we did shorten it, but we kept the intent of that vision statement, and so that is what was being presented here to you today. And what goes along with the vision statement is a set of aspirations. And we're looking at these aspirations as kind of overarching high-level planning principles that then we can subsequently use to help frame the goals and strategies that will be in the regional plan. And so for this evening, as was kind of mentioned before, this is kind of the start of the conversation. We want to kind of get kind of like a temperature read on how you think this reflects Central Vermont and thinking forward to the future. And so for this evening, the next activity is going to be using those colored dots. So everybody should have 5 blue dots and then a set of kind of like the traffic light dots. And if you don't have those, let me know in a moment and I can get you those. So we are seeking for your feedback on the vision statement, and then we're going to ask for you to kind of identify which top aspirations you feel are most critical and most important to the region as we look to the future. And so the vision statement, as it reads right now, is that Central Vermont is a place where people and commerce thrive and innovate. The health of the natural environment and residents' quality of life are valued, and local communities are equipped to plan for and respond to emerging trends and unexpected challenges. So what we're asking you here is to kind of tell us whether you generally agree, generally disagree, or if you're kind of unsure or indifferent about this statement. And if you are indifferent or unsure, we kind of really want to hear why. And we're asking for those additional comments. Either you can just just write them on here, or you can use those sticky notes. And so that's one piece that we're looking for your feedback on. The other feedback, as I mentioned, is regarding these 11 aspirations. And in your packet, they were numbered, and that was primarily just to give a point of reference if you were wanting to refer to one of them, so it would be an easy reference. The numbering in no way, shape, or form means like a level of priority or importance, and they very well might not even be numbered in the plan anyway. So, and as I mentioned, you'll be using your blue dots there, and we want you to use them to say which 5 items do you think are the most important or critical for us to be addressing as we look to the next 20, 30 years of the central Vermont region. There was a question about, like, can other comments be made on these aspirations? We, of course, do want your comments, and so we ask that you don't necessarily look at kind of like getting into like the wordsmithing of them, but we're looking for your feedback on them for kind of like the, you know, the idea that they're presenting. And please use your sticky notes, or feel free to write actually on the paper if there's additional comments that you want to have out there, and the Regional Plan Committee will be gathering all of these and going through them at their next committee meeting. So with that, before we move into the actual activity, because we'll be asking you to get out of your seats and move around, were there any comments on the information or questions about what we're asking you to do?
I think so.
Great, okay.
Great.
So, does everybody have 5 blue stickers and the set of colored ones? Okay. So, I guess we're gonna give you until 8:15, is 10 minutes long enough for you to do this exercise? So we'll sit back down at 8:15. Right.
Oh, no, then everyone would leave.
I think that was his point.
Thank you for that. It looks kind of interesting if you look around at the different aspirations. There looks like some that got more dots than others, but I don't really want to judge. I think you can see them for yourself, and I get staff will take note of those. I don't know how you plan to do that, just you're taking them down and taking them with you. So thanks, everyone. And I think Claire said that we're going to be going over all this information at our meeting, which is next Tuesday.
The Regional Plan Committee.
Yes, the Regional Plan Committee, to incorporate what we've learned tonight, and I think it was very helpful. Does anybody else have any comments before we move on? Mike?
I just found kind of going around, everybody sharing stuff with their towns. I mean, you sort of feel sort of isolated with your own problems, and I really realized that everybody has them. That was great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somehow there's comfort in knowing you're not alone.
Yes.
Misery loves company or something.
Usually, yes.
I like seeing the similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Common themes.
Yes. So I think we're moving on to the next agenda item, and that is approval of minutes, I believe, on page 11 of your packet. And does anyone have any comments or additions or corrections?
I don't know, did they spell my name right this time?
Of course. I think we have a question about who Rob was, but I don't know.
I didn't get his last name.
Okay.
Didn't either.
Okay.
I wondered if any of you
I'm
knew.
embarrassed to say, but you know, I've never seen that person before in my entire life, and which means he has nothing to do with town government.
He came for the basin plan, is
Oh,
what
yeah.
he told me he came for, but I didn't catch his last name.
He has involved in any planning.
Well, if you wanted, I guess you can roll the tape and figure it out. Oh, okay, all right. So if everyone's okay with the minutes, can I have a motion to approve, please?
I'll make the motion to
Oh,
approve minutes.
okay.
I'll second.
Okay, good. Bob makes a motion and Don seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, all abstaining, the motion is carried. And lastly, reports. Do you have anything you want to say, staff?
Aye. felt like I did, and I don't after today.
Okay, we don't have to. You all have them in your packet, and if you have any comments or questions, now's the time, or you can just email staff and ask them about it. Other than that, I think we can adjourn.
You need that motion?
I would love that motion.
Guess
Don
who's
makes a
putting it up?
motion to adjourn.
I think Don will want to have a
Oh,
motion.
hold on,
No,
hold
it's
on.
okay.
No, it's okay. All right, go ahead. Moving on. We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? We have a second from Alan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, all abstaining. Thank you very much for a lovely evening.